All right, today we're taking a deep dive into Datum Jelatek. It's this massive, really futuristic-looking skyscraper in Kuala Lumpur that makes a huge promise to solve city living by putting you right on top of a train station and a mall. So let's get into it and see if it actually lives up to the hype.
But here's the big question, right? Is it really the perfect city home? I mean, on paper, it looks absolutely incredible. But as we're about to see, this building is a fascinating paradox. It's a story of grand, sky-high ambition meeting a very, very complex reality on the ground.
I mean, just look at the pitch. You get a direct, covered link to the Jelatek LRT station. That's the city's main train line. You got this insane skyring bridge connecting all four towers way up on the 27th floor. There's a mall literally right downstairs for you. And you're just 4 quick train stops away from KLCC, the heart of the city. Talk about ultimate convenience.
But you know, that's just the hardware, the physical stuff. The software, what it's actually like to live there, its soul, its place in the community, well, that tells a completely different story. And this is where we get to the central conflict of this whole development.
So let's start with the world outside the building's walls, because this is where the first major crack in the facade starts to appear, its relationship, or maybe lack thereof, with the neighborhood it was dropped into.
So here's the thing you have to understand. Datum Jelatek wasn't built in some trendy, upscale part of town. Nope, it was built right in the middle of Kampung Datuk Keramat, a really historic, working-class neighborhood. The result is something analysts call gentrification friction. It's like a gleaming tower of wealth that stands totally separate, a vertical island, from the community all around it.
And wow, this slide just perfectly illustrates that divide. On one side, you have the luxury silo, what locals would call atas, high class. It launched with a fancy premium grocer aimed at expats. On the other side, you've got the local community, the marhan, or the common people, who shop at local wet markets and have a long history of resentment over what was torn down to build this. There's just almost zero overlap between these two worlds.
Okay, so that's the outside story. Now, let's go inside. Let's talk about what it's actually like to live in this place, once you get past all the glossy marketing brochures.
So living here is all about a serious trade-off. The good? Let's be honest. The views from that sky ring are absolutely spectacular. Unbeatable. But the bad? The smaller units, they feel more like hotel rooms. They're missing really practical things like a proper yard to dry your clothes or a fully kitted-out kitchen. And then there's the noise. Being right next to the train tracks and a major highway means you've got this constant soundtrack of screeching trains and roaring traffic.
You know, nothing tells the story of this building's identity crisis better than the mall downstairs. It opened with a super high-end grocer, the food merchant, aiming for that wealthy crowd. But the local community couldn't afford it, and the residents alone weren't enough to keep it afloat. So within a year, it shut down, and it was replaced by Hero Market, which is a much more value-focused supermarket. Now, this was a smart business move, but it kind of dilutes that exclusive luxury brand the building was sold on.
And all of this leads to another huge issue, the hotelification of the building. Because a lot of potential long-term residents are turned off by the noise and the small units, a ton of owners have pivoted to short-term rentals, like Airbnb. This means your neighbors are constantly changing, security can become a real challenge, and that feeling of a stable residential community, it's pretty much gone.
So if it's a tough place for some people to actually live, is it at least a good investment? Let's crunch the numbers and look at this from an investor's point of view.
This chart right here, it explains everything. If you rent your unit out long-term, your net yield after costs is pretty average, around 3.6%. But if you run it as a short-term rental, you could potentially hit a gross yield of 7 to 9%. This is exactly why the building is flooded with Airbnbs. For many investors, it's the only way to make the math make sense.
But hold on, here's the hidden trap. Because this is technically a commercial titled property, not a residential one, your electricity bills are roughly 50% higher. 50! That is a massive extra cost that just eats away at your profits and makes it that much harder for any long-term tenants to afford to live there.
So, how does it stack up against the competition? Well, its connectivity is top tier for sure. But notice that price point. It's pretty high for a leasehold property. For less money, you could get a freehold unit down the road at the Elements, but you'd lose that train link. And look over here, a future competitor, Astra Mampong, is planning to offer the same direct LRT link, but with smaller, cheaper units. That could seriously threaten Datum's rental market down the line.
Okay,
So we've seen the good, the bad, and the very, very noisy. What is the final verdict here? We've broken it down into two very clear paths, depending on who you are.
All right, for an investor, this is a pure cash flow play. Forget about the property value going up. That's not the game here. The strategy is to find a smaller unit that faces the quieter pool area, get it for the right price, do not pay over $850 per square foot, and then be fully prepared to actively manage it like a short-term rental business. Now, for someone who actually wants to live there, this is a lifestyle buy. You should only, and I mean only, consider it if that direct train commute is the absolute #1 most important thing for your quality of life. And before you even think about buying, you have to visit at night to hear the noise for yourself. And make sure you budget for those much, much higher utility bills.
So, here's the bottom line. Datum Jelatek, despite its stunning views and unbeatable connection, is not a simple, passive property investment you just buy and hold. As we've seen, it's a high-maintenance asset. It is a business that demands your active, hands-on management. And that right there is the central paradox you have to solve before you can ever really call this place home.